Very good, Surijit. Very crisp, direct, and anti-national. Coming from JNU. Yeah. All right. Avani.
Thank you so much. Um, so I'm speaking more about, I guess, the manner in which now financing is happening. So I think we've heard about the quantum, which is low, as we all know. We've heard about the hopes of future financing, and I think there again, it's quite clear that government doesn't have resources. That was really interesting. The study of just the gap in terms of projected revenue, but what should financing look like in an ideal world? And to be honest, when we started thinking about performance based financing, कुछ हद तक खुशी भी हुई that finally we're talking about performance. अभी तक we were talking about inputs, how many schools should we have, how many children should be enrolled, and so at least we were starting to move the needle कि थोड़ा सा learning outcome quality के ऊपर at least चर्चा हो रही है. At the same time, I think in the NEP, what was again interesting in the one of the chapters, which was the one of the few chapters that are looking at the financing, the language that was used, it was talking about efficient resources. It was talking about effective governance. The governance का word है वो भी आ गया NEP में with respect to even the fiscal situation. But unfortunately, I think that somewhere the imagination stopped there. And जो the way that performance or outcome based financing that is currently conceptualized in India definitely has a lot of drawbacks. And reflect on a few of them and also reflect on why there are drawbacks and a little bit on what can be done. I think the first thing when we are thinking about outcome is कि वो performance outcome होना क्या चाहिए? What is the right indicator? And that's often where we get stuck. That's the first point of being stuck. We did some work for the 15th Finance Commission, and we were talking about devolution just now. While the Finance Commission ने बोला कि gram panchayat ko it should be completely untied money. Even the basic grant, but of course there's a performance grant. But there also they had very clear performance criteria and said that no one else should add any more criteria to it. But of course, what we saw was that both Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Panchayati Raj added more indicators for measuring that performance. And what was particularly disturbing was that they added things like full immunization rate, when actually the power of doing that immunization does not rest with the panchayat. So how can you hold the panchayat accountable when you haven't actually devolved everywhere neither the funds nor the functions nor the functionaries? So thinking of the right metric becomes critical, and that's where we always get stuck in education. Ki what should be that right metric of performance? Are we limiting it only to particular types of learning outcome? What about enabling environment? NEP also talks about foundational learning. I'm coming from a conversation on early childhood care, where an important point was made that kabhi even if the Anganwadi center is not able to provide education, it plays a vital role that you can't always capture. Even in terms of the role it plays as in terms of the supportive environment where mothers can leave their children and they know it's a safe environment. So should performance be based on कितने टॉयज थे, कितने बच्चे आए, कितना क्या वो ABCD कर पाए, or should it be something else? And that's where we often get stuck in this outcome-based financing. The other worrying thing when we talk about outcome-based financing is the fact that we haven't often changed that. If we haven't made the governance environment efficient or effective, and in the absence of that, to do any form of conditionality becomes complicated. So. Mr. Dugal's worked a lot in health. In health, we've been looking at this, the health system strengthening conditionality report. And in health, you can clearly see that even though there was that attempt कि you have groups of states which are based on a certain performance, the EAG states, because even though it's not explicitly linked to a performance in terms of an outcome, initially also we had performance linked to utilization of funds. So if you utilize more, you get more money. If you utilize less, you are often penalized for it. And so we were looking at 14-15 ka data, and you can see a state like Kerala in health, for example, per capita from Government of India would get rupees about almost 300, so 299, whereas a state like Bihar would get 124. Kerala ka need versus performance is very different in terms of the health outcomes, which is very clearly visible. And so I think what is worrying when one is thinking of performance is, are we choosing the right indicator? Are we choosing the right time frame? So you can't just suddenly say that, kal se I'm going to start measuring your performance. You have to give a little bit of leeway time to actually make sure your systems are in order. And do we have the right environment as well? The second aspect in terms of environment that I wanted to touch upon was that abhi tak we're still following a very annual planning cycle. We are still following a very line item wise budgeting cycle for most centrally sponsored schemes. And in such an environment, can we actually then say that some bit of your grant is then linked only to you achieving certain outcomes? From planning, we have seen that even Government of India's own planning cycle 6 months चले जाते हैं before money starts even going. So how can you start planning from a 1-year cycle? So in terms of recommendations, I think one of the things that we would say is that if you have to move, I think looking at outcomes is important, but then let's have a 3-year planning cycle or a multi-year planning cycle, because एक साल में मुझे outcome दिखाना या perform करना मुश्किल होगा, because money itself, your fund flow system is following a different cycle. Similarly, I think that in order to have effective movement towards outcome, you need that autonomy and flexibility. And Abhi, you were talking about the autonomy to states, and I think similarly, you need autonomy to schools, you need autonomy to school development committees, you need autonomy at district level. And so how can one, without having that autonomy, how can one then actually expect performance? Currently, most of the schemes function in a way that you literally have to negotiate for even small money and small changes to my program. So if I want to do my teacher training program for 6 days instead of 5, well, that requires an entire negotiation process and an entire approval process. You don't have untied funds available, even if they are formula based, even if they are fixed norms to achieve, to get those untied funds, you don't have those untied funds available. And so in the absence of those, how can one hold one set accountable without actually giving autonomy to meet that outcome available? In education, I think some of these things are very easily done. I think creating windows, so you have clear norms, you have clear teacher norms, you have clear, now you're talking about school complexes, you have clear norms that are developing about it. I think a lot more norms need to be developed, especially when we're thinking of foundational learning till so the entire gamut of school education. So I think that there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's relatively easy to come up with those benchmarks and almost like costing benchmarks. So where does the state stand? You have the UDIs, so you could actually, at least for infrastructure and the human resources, you could come up with a window that is linked very clearly. And so instead of having states plan year by year, you know what the deficit is, you know what the progress has been every year or every couple of years. And so you could give an untied fixed per child amount or a fixed amount that could be given. And you need that kind of flexibility in order to then have that conditionality. Because right now, what we are seeing, at least in the health sector, is that states are constantly getting penalized. And you'll have that strange situation where, on one hand, you're getting penalized for not spending. So even though that's not a performance-based incentive, the way that we are thinking of in terms of outcome-based, it's still a performance-based kind of funding, because one is linked to your ability to utilize money, and then the second is linked to your ability to have outcomes. So you need to have that balance of the two. And so I think I will end with 3 quick points. I think one, in education, like I said, having some form of untied grants linked to your current deficit is very easy to do. you have UDICE. Yes, UDICE is problematic, but at the same time, as you start using it a lot more, you could actually make it better. And linked to how to make it better would be get your school development plans integrated into the planning cycle. So even the NEP talks about SD school management committees as a way of effective governance. Well, you haven't given them resources. You haven't actually found a way of integrating their plans into the overall annual plan and budget cycle. So why would it? How would it become effective? Second would be you need to figure out your data systems. Currently, also, even the health one talks about, well, the conditionalities are based on HMIS, which we know is often problematic. We know that not everyone's using it. We know that people game the system. People are raising questions about how to make the data sets better and reliable. This is mentioned in the report itself. So similarly, before we get into a performance-based incentive, we need to start having some form of third-party verification or just have systems in place to have the right measure, as I said. And lastly, like I said, you need your governance system in place in order to actually get there, which could mean some amount of lead time. So minimum requirements that could be put in place. And I think in order to balance that equity angle with the outcome angle, I think all of these these things are critical. Otherwise, my fear is we'll go down the health route, where a lot of states are not, they don't know how much they're going to get. They are often penalized for things that aren't always in their control, because already the existing grants come with so many conditionalities. And so that's kind of a model system, or at least the way that we could start thinking about it. And I do think it's an important thing to start thinking about outcomes and move the conversation away from just क्या बच्चे आए, कितने schools थे, how many teachers were there, and think a little bit about intangible. But it's going to be a tricky exercise. And so we should be very cautious and careful of how we go about it.
Thank you, Avani. So we have some very thought-provoking issues that we need to grapple with in Avani's presentation. With that, let me open the floor for about 10 minutes. We can have first round of about 5 interventions. Depending on time, we can take more. So a show of hands, please. And my apologies that I have not been here since morning, so I do not know most of you. So request you to also announce who you are, okay, for the benefit of the panel, including me.
I'm Mukut from Assam. Well, my question will be, because as we have from morning, we are saying we have been meeting for almost last 7-8 years and always. So now my question will be the honorable panel. I'll use the word, now we have the weapon. Should we still keep talking about the weapon, or do we use it now? We heard what? Yeah, I think I was really impressed with Surajit's, as you said, it is crisp. It hits where it has to hit. I think it has already hit. I think all the youth, this 18 to 23, all the campuses everywhere. I have seen 10 days back in Guwahati. Now every college, every university, now you can't say it's, so it is very clear. So how do we proceed the next step?
Very profound question, but yes. Anyone on the left?
Yeah, I am Praveer from West Bengal, and left as usual. And it's not question, just a remarks that we always have. We had the Right to Education Act in 2010, and even in other acts also, we see the government bringing acts or everything, but we have never seen so far the financial memorandum attached to it. There is no commitment of what government is going to spend or allocate or whatever it is. And as a civil society forum, I think it's a high time for us to really ask, because there are a lot of researchers. Since morning we have had a lot of hearing on this. Researchers are there, but now I think we'll have to demand that what is the government's real commitment is towards that.
I don't know whether it's a question or a clarification from Avani. In your presentation, I saw you using school. Huh. Oh, sorry. Hello, everybody. I'm Aprajita. And but I was a little confused through in your presentation when you used performance-based budgeting and outcome budgeting, which you located as positive, and then you also told that in education it's easier because we already have the norms, and then you referred to school closure as norm. So what is the normative framework that you're having in your presentation, and how do you locate norms vis-a-vis outcome budgeting, which is the trend when we are doing state budgets or even budgeting as such. So I would rather like to know a little more on that. And another thing which I also had was when you spoke about NEP, and one of the norm that's most of the norms is not referred to. I mean, even in the public, financing part, which is referred to in the most of the norms are not referred to as, and has not even been discussed. But one norm that's teachers has been discussed, has got some space, and it talks about incentivizing, teacher, which comes from performance-based budgeting. So in that context, I wanted to ask, like, how do you see it as positive?
So my responses are actually linked to what you also asked, and I think that apart from what they're going to spend, the financial thing, I think we need to start asking about what should be spent, and I think that there hasn't been enough discussion about that. So I'm coming from a presentation where we're looking at costing and the ideal costing, and even that 6% that we talk about. Well, we haven't gone back to it in a while. We haven't gone back to thinking about what would be an ideal system, and let's benchmark it against what should we spend instead of even saying what is going to be spent. Because I think that, as you're saying, let's push the conversation further, and that's an important way to push the conversation. अभी तक हम allocation के बारे में बहुत बात कर चुके हैं. Allocation is not enough, expenditure is not enough. Well, how much should it be? And let's actually start getting into it, which is where I think that number was useful, right? The 9874 per month average wage cost is a useful starting point to say kitna should be spent. On the norms, so don't think that I'm saying that outcome-based financing is the way to go. In fact, I give lots of caveats to say we need to think really strong and hard, because what is the outcome that we are measuring? What is the performance that we are measuring? What norm? What indicator? I think that what I was saying was that I think it's useful that we've started having that conversation at least. I am not pro, like, when it fiscal performance for teachers. So I don't think I think there's enough evidence to show that does not work. So let's look at the evidence to figure out what can work. The norms that I was talking about is that if one has to go by RTE, you have clear norms about which, in terms of how many teachers given population. Again, I do think that we need to revisit those norms, which is what I mentioned. I think one of the biggest failures of RTE was the multigrade teaching that it allowed for. The fact that it was okay to have 2 teachers and 60 students and 5 grades. And now we're having to see that reversal, right? Now we're talking about suddenly school complexes, the fact that we're merging schools because we've realized that we didn't think through how can we pool resources. Given that we have a right to education for some things, it's easy to come up with those benchmarks. So how many teachers are required? You have a UDI system which will tell you whether a school has a toilet or not. It's easy to cost for that. You have a UDI system which will tell you how many teachers there are, how many classrooms there are, how many usable classrooms there are. So you have a data frame in place to at least come up with some of the deficits. And SDP will help in the prioritization of those deficits. So a school may have multiple requirements, but currently my first requirement is A, B, C, D. Some of these can be costed for and could be actually linked to a grant. So what I was saying was that you need to have a window. You need to have one window. And I'm saying before we even do an outcome-based performance, we need to be able to have flexible funding, which is norm-based, which is based on current deficits, which are identified, which can be then costed for, and then give states the flexibility to at least reach that minimum threshold. So that's how I was speaking about it, not in terms of let's do performance-based based on a particular norm.
Yeah, underspending, way forward, and government's real commitment. Uh, okay, first let me begin by a story. In Asian Development Research Institute, Patna, Professor Shaival Gupta invited me. So there somebody asked this question from the floor that you guys are talking about fiscal deficit, this, that, etc. But most of the departments at state level as well as at the central government level, these ministries, they spend, the most efficient departments and ministries also spend something around 75 to 80% of their budget. So where from this much of fiscal deficit accruing, which is around, let's say, 10% of budget. Now, definitely it has to, the answer has to be that the revenue shortfall must be much larger than the underspending. That's why this fiscal deficit is accruing. So regarding this taxation and way forward and government's real commitment, I think these are all linked questions. In my mind, in this country, we have this privately funded not only electoral system but political system. To run these political parties, the cost is huge, not only for fighting election but for running political parties all over the country. And obviously, these are all rent-seeking businesses that until and unless it's not only at organized level at the national level but also at state level and as well as local level, if I have to become a leader, local leader, then I have to accumulate my resources. And in order to do that, I have to give some assurance to the tax evaders that if you contribute this much in my party fund, I would be able to make sure that you are safe even if you evade tax which is more in amount. So in this kind of a system, we all are against corruption, but we don't go into the root cause of the corruption. I think which is this privately funded political system in this country. And because of that, these are nothing but evaded taxes. They don't enter the exchequer. That's the difference. But for all practical purposes, they are all taxes. And I was looking at, again, international data. They are given, our tax rates are not low in this country, but vis-a-vis tax GDP ratio, we are one of the lowest in the whole world. So why does it happen? Literature says that our tax base is relatively lower, maximum people are poor. But even poorer countries than us, African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, Latin American countries are raising their tax GDP ratio is something around 30%, 32%. In this country, it is combined tax GDP ratio is 16.5 to 17%. Why does it happen? These are all evaded taxes, and the evaded taxes are actually running the privately funded political system. Let's face it, it's open secret. There is, I won't be able to, sorry.
Mauritius route of
That is, yeah, that is round tripping and all. That's another route. But there are various ways of evading taxes, and this political system gives some kind of assurance that they get away with it by contributing some money, which is less than the evaded tax amount, to the party various party funds. So I think. Until and unless that is changed, then there would not be any change in the balance of class forces in power. And until and unless that happens, the real commitments of the governments, I mean, elected politically within this system, would remain like this in character. I mean, let's face it. Thanks.
2 minutes.
Yeah, just a couple of issues I'll add. The one about this financial memorandum, etc. Now, if there is going to be an amendment, for example, of the RTE, with the new policy in mind, some issues may come up and that may require amendment of the act. And I think we must push for benchmarking a budget within the act. So, for example, if they're talking about 20% of the budget of states, then let's see that it is there in the act, so it becomes a kind of you can go to court if they don't spend that money. So that I think that is one thing that could be done, either as a percent of the state budget, or better still, if we can work out based on costing a per capita amount. For example, what Kendriya Vidyalaya spend as a possible thing. Then vis-a-vis 15th Finance Commission, I think, the earlier Finance Commission used to make allocations for social sector separately. It's a debatable thing, but I think there is some merit in maybe going back to that, because there is no planning commission now. So with all those things gone, and the center playing a smaller role in that. So maybe the Finance Commission could think about sectoral allocations also, to kind of assure that some kind of benchmarks are maintained in social sector budgets. And on the issue of underspending, I think underspending is a consequence of underinvestment. I mean, we've discussed this in the earlier sessions also. And if you don't invest adequately, I mean, if you build a high school and you don't provide all the teachers, all the laboratories, all the equipment needed, etc., it's not going to work. Okay, so you will ultimately underspend because you have not maybe recruited everybody. So vacant positions means underspent money, and so on and so forth. So if you're underinvesting, then you're also going to underspend. And so there's a link within that. So.
Since I have a bad throat, you're spared from a longish kind of spiel from me. I'll just take 2 minutes.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Actually, it was something Dr. Duggal said, and in the morning, Dr. Govinda said that when RT was made, it was decided that the first we are going to recruit all the necessary teachers. So the budgeting prioritization will be such that first the teachers should be there, and then the other input should be there. And I was just wondering that we know in the budget making process, one makes a budget estimate, and then you get much less than what you estimated. So if there was some prioritization that when the budget comes, so this is where you're going to spend, then maybe there would be more efficient even utilization.
All right. No, let me first thank the eminent panelists for very good suggestions and ideas, and to all of you who made some inputs. But let me also say that we actually are in a very difficult terrain, with respect to the themes that we are discussing, the issues which we are raising, and so on. If, this could be done, if that could be done, if wishes were horses, right? Actually, none of this will be done, right? There was no financial memorandum, not because it was some act of omission, it was out of design, right? Hence, as we know, as Ambrish Bhai keeps reminding you that barely 12% of schools are RTE compliant and so on and so forth, right? So one needs to understand this larger design and so on. So it's fundamentally, we live in Orwellian times. I'm sure some of you have read Orwell's 1984, right? So on the one hand, you have very good sounding things which are put on the platter, even rights. But the entire support system to back those rights are completely dismantled. Right? So whether it is adequate sources of resources, infrastructure, XYZ, and so on and so forth. So then this whole challenge becomes, how do we do this? Right? Yeah, what should be done? Mukut, you asked this question. Lenin asked this question ages ago. What is to be done? Right? So what is to be done? We are struggling. Not that we don't know the answers. What you're discussing today, what you have discussed today, is being discussed ad nauseum in this country. A huge amount of work, right? I mean, I don't think there is dearth of wisdom and knowledge, right? Outcome, performance, incentives. It was being discussed in Cuba in 1960s, right? In USSR in 1930s and 40s, okay? When the USSR started floundering on some of these things, there was a very famous cartoon in Pravda, right? Which was, a particular enterprise was asked to produce 20 tons of nails, right? And the cartoon was one huge nail weighing 20 tons, and the caption said, "Comrades, we have fulfilled the quota." Right? That one 20-ton nail is no good, we know that. Right? So, yes, the literature is large. We have huge amount of knowledge, wisdom, and so on and so forth. We can learn from global experiences. We refuse to look at that. Okay? OECD countries, 90% of schools still, after some privatization and so on, still government schools, public provisioning, right? They never ask this question whether we should have a blackboard or a bathroom. Never. Just look at their experiences. It was a vision of what a good school ought to be. Once you have that, then, of course, you don't get into these idiotic notions of outcomes and performances and so on, which is exactly where the level of debate is in official circles. Once in a while, someone like Avani tries to go and make some sense there. No, let's try and, 15th Finance Commission, you think they're ever going to pay attention to these things? Right? So, at the end of the day, what is extremely important is any good economics needs good politics. And politics cannot happen in these rooms. Right? And forget about education. I mean, the country is being destroyed today. All of you are seized of the matter, the challenges and so on. Right? What are we doing? Are we in a position to impact that good politics? It is a question which Gopal Gandhi asked yesterday in the same complex, right? He gave a lecture yesterday called Freedom and Sons. Yeah. This was the first Mushir Sahab Memorial Lecture. Okay. And essentially, the question that is being put is, are you willing to take all this sitting back at home, lying down, and so on and so forth? Okay. So I think the real challenge is, how do we sort of get a political process going to ensure that many of the good things which were talked about, that can be realized. So that at the end of the day, the different pieces of the puzzle, different aspects of policy, etc., okay, on which we have a reasonable understanding saying that, look, this is not good. For instance, if you ask me, GST is a disaster with capital D. I mean, there's no saving grace about it. All the claims which were advanced in favor of it is utter lie. There's not any shred of evidence. If you look at global economic system, not one bit of evidence which tells you that apart from benefiting capital in terms of having a certain ease across certain territories, it helps in any way in terms of macroeconomic policies and so on and so forth. No, it's so. Now, if that is indeed the case, can we do something about it? Right? You know, the government of the day tells you, shout. We are not going to listen to you. Mr. Shah today said, go ahead, do what you can, we are not going to change it. Right? So that, in a sense, is the real challenge, you know, with respect to education as well, as with policy making at large. Right? So, you know, Surjit, for instance, talked of the tax GDP ratio, the devolution on education, right? Put it very neatly and so on. We know that this is something on which we have humongous research, right, for many years now, decades now, right? But why is it that nobody listens? You see, so I think these are some of the challenges that we need to also think through and think about. And at the level of ideas, sure, I mean, I think the inputs that we got are quite worthwhile. By and large, a reiteration of, as I said, what we know, what we have known for a long time, okay? We need to keep sharpening these arguments, and in that sense, these exercises are extremely helpful when you come with a study which is grounded in real experiences at the current juncture. Of course, it also makes the case that much sharper, right? So with that, let me stop and close this session. Thank you for your participation. Subrat, floor is yours.
Nahin, I mean, on behalf of RT Forum and CBJ, I would really like to thank all of you. We really value your time and your interest in our effort. And special thanks to all our panelists and friends who have chaired different sessions. Amrish ji, kuch closing remarks aapke taraf se, and then we can all go back.
झा साहब की बात से सहमत हूँ कि अब बहरे कानों को सुनाने के लिए कुछ करना होगा, क्योंकि बहुत सारा हम लोग बहुत दिनों से सब चर्चा कर रहे हैं और अब तो आरटी भी काफ़ी ख़तरे में है। तो इसलिए अब क्या कर सकते हैं, अब इस 2 दिन की हमारी नेशनल काउंसिल है एंड वी आर जस्ट कंप्लीटिंग 10 years ऑफ इनैक्टमेंट ऑफ आरटीई. So this is the good opportunity to bring back the attention of different stakeholders, people, government as well, through the people's movement. So we will design the people's movement tomorrow and day after tomorrow across the country. Why this RT is necessary for the universalization of education, equitable quality education. So we will come out, मतलब कमरे से बाहर निकलना है, बस अब इसकी योजना बनानी होगी हमको. और दूसरी बात मैं इसलिए कहना चाहता हूँ क्योंकि अभी ये पूरा इस समय जो है पूरा देश आंदोलन में है, देश सड़क पे है. एक फीस वृद्धि के खिलाफ, प्राइवेटाइजेशन के खिलाफ जेएनयू में मूवमेंट शुरू हुआ, फिर उसमें सीए आ गया, एनआरसी आ गया, नॉर्थ ईस्ट पूरा खड़ा हो गया. एंड मुझे लगता है कि कोई ऐसा देश का विश्वविद्यालय या कॉलेज नहीं होगा जहाँ पर इसकी प्रतिक्रिया न हुई हो. तो वी आर जस्ट लुकिंग ए डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ फेज जहाँ गवर्नमेंट अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी से भाग रही है, जहाँ गवर्नमेंट जो है वो इकोनॉमिक रिसेशन को और जो बेसिक ज़रूरतें हैं उसको एड्रेस करने को तैयार नहीं है और वो दूसरे मुद्दों पे देश को बांटने और उलझाने में लगी हुई है. लेकिन जो यंग जनरेशन है वो इसको समझ रहा है और वो ये समझ रहा है कि देश, संविधान, यूनिटी और हमारा भविष्य सब खतरे में है और वो लोग बाहर निकल रहे हैं. तो मुझे लगता है कि ये हमारे आंदोलन को भी उस आंदोलन के साथ जुड़ने की ज़रूरत है इस समय, क्योंकि स्टूडेंट्स आर, जैसे सुबह भी बात हुई कि अब ये जो डिस्कनेक्ट है स्कूल एजुकेशन और हायर एजुकेशन एंड दिस, ये डिस्कनेक्ट हमको ख़त्म करना होगा. और एजुकेशन इज मोर अबाउट पॉलिटिकल इशू, और इसलिए इस पे जो है राजनीति को बदलने का जो जहाँ साहब कह रहे हैं कि ये इकनॉमी और ये सारा कुछ तभी होगा जब हमारे पास एक अच्छी राजनीति होगी. उस दिशा में हमको बढ़ना है और हमको रियल इशूज पर बात करने के लिए मजबूर करना है. तो मैं समझता हूँ कि हम इसको बनाएं, और अब वो टिट-बिट से कुछ होने वाला नहीं है. वो माफ़ कीजिएगा, मैं प्रेजेंटेशंस के खिलाफ नहीं हूँ, लेकिन थक गए प्रेजेंटेशन, आवेदन, निवेदन ये करते करते. तो अब थोड़ा सा बाहर निकला जाए और जो बातें हम कमरों में कहते हैं वही बातें हम बाहर करें, क्योंकि हमको लगता है बहुत सारी चीज़ें लोगों को जानकारी नहीं है कि क्या हो रहा है. अब जैसे आज सुरजीत ने जो प्रेजेंटेशन रखा, 170 देशों में इन्वेस्टमेंट के मामले में हम कहाँ खड़े हैं, और हम बार बार ये कहते रहते हैं कि ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी है और इतना % और GDP 4% है, तब भी दुनिया में जाके कह रहे हैं कि सब ठीक ठाक चल रहा है हिंदुस्तान में है. और 4% भी नहीं है, वो 2.5% है एक्चुअली, तब भी कह रहे हैं कि हमारे देश में सब ठीक ठाक है. ये एक्सपोज करने का समय आ गया है और अपनी सही बात लोगों तक ले जाने का वक्त है. धन्यवाद.